We are right before the Mishnah on Nun Daled Amud Beis. We have one more brisa about creation, and then we're going to talk about a new minhag. Okay, so 54b1, the second column, or Nun Daled Amud Beis. Tanar Rabbanan. Gimel Dvarim, Shlosh Dvarim, Al Machshav Libaros. There are three things which entered the thoughts of Hashem to be created, and were actually created. Vimlo Alu, had they not been created, din hu shiyalu, or had God, so to speak, not thought of them, it would have been logical for God to think of them. In other words, these are things which are self-evident. We could fully understand why Hashem created these things. What are those things? Alames shiasriach, that a corpse decomposes. Have you ever thought about that? Why does a corpse decompose? Like, what's that all about? In other words, okay, it's just reality, but he's pointing out that there is a value for a corpse to decompose. And Rashi explains why, because if not, then a person would leave, and actually some cultures have this where they embalm the body and they actually leave it in. There's one, I remember reading some article about some culture where they embalm the bodies of their dead, and they leave them in their room, like in the room of the house, like, you know, they basically, like in the house, like grandma's still here, and basically they just leave it. And so why is it important? Rashi says because it's important that we move on. It's important that we move past the morning. And imagine a person wants to bump into that daily, it would be too much, and therefore the body decomposes to encourage us to go ahead with burial. And similarly, that Hashem makes it that eventually we forget, not completely forget, but the point is that with time, you know, people say time heals, that Hashem allows for memories to lessen over time. Completely separate, but that produce rots. What's the value of things rotting? In other words, why can't food all have like a natural preservatives? Why do you have to fight nature to preserve things? The reason is because if not, then wealthy people go ahead and stockpile. The fact that things rot ensure that I can't hold on to things forever. And sometimes, you know, you have these organizations. Think about the amount of free food that is given out because of the fact that places can't stockpile all their food. And every once in a while, like, okay, we have to give it to the local charity. You know, the reason, you know, people are generous, but also companies are not so generous. It's just that they can't sell things after a certain point, and so they give it to the food banks, right? Baruch Hashem. That's because food rots. The last thing is that currency circulates. What that means, big discussion in some of the some of the Rishonim and Achronim, but it seems like one of the ideas is that currency, the fact that there is this idea that we've all rallied around, that currency actually has value. Right? In other words, really it doesn't make any sense. Really, we should be bartering. I want some of your products, so I should give you my book, and you should give it back. But the fact that we could all align ourselves and say, oh, this green thing is going to be a value, whether it's in the modern era of currency and its implications, or the ancient era of currency, it doesn't really make sense. But without that, society would not be able to flourish. And the fact that we could have these unified current, systems of currency is one of the brachos, is one of the things that Hashem ultimately created. But if not, it would have been valuable for humankind to have come up with it because it's critical for civilization. Okay, that is the end of our discussion about the 6 days of creation. And the last minhag, we're going to introduce a new minhag, and that is makom shnagu lasos malacha b'Tisha B'av, a place where people have the custom to perform work on Tisha B'av. Osin, you're allowed to work. Makom shnagu shelo lasos malacha, a place where people do not work on Tisha B'av. Ein osin, it is forbidden to work. Uvechol makom, in all places, talmidei chacham metelim, Torah scholars should remain idle all day. In other words, even in a place where there is a minhag that you are allowed to work on Tisha B'av, Torah scholars should not work. Rav Shimon Gamliel says a person should compare himself to a Talmid Chacham. What he's getting at, the Gemara is going to explain, is that normally there's a principle that a person is not supposed to act in a fashion which is, so to speak, above themselves. There's a concept called michse kiyura. You're acting like it comes across as arrogance when you're acting in too lofty a fashion. You wouldn't think such a concept exists, but there's a concept in Judaism where, in halacha, where a person goes ahead and takes on a stringency, and it's actually problematic because in doing so, you're not big enough to do this, right? So the idea is over here with Tisha B'av not working. There, Rav Shimon Gamliel says everyone's allowed to do this. No one's going to accuse you of, or don't worry about the accusation of you looking like you're arrogant. Over here, everyone should act like a Talmid Chacham, even though sometimes in doing so we say, actually, you're not entitled to act like a Talmid Chacham because it appears as arrogant. Over here, that limitation does not exist. Okay, says the Gemara. 54b2. Amar Shmuel. Ein tanas tibur Bavel el Tisha B'av bilvad. There is no public fast day in Bavel. What that means is that all the stringencies that exist by public fast days, the only one that exists in Bavel is Tisha B'av. The way Rashi understands this is that we're going to eventually, Mirch Hashem, soon get to Maseches Tainus. And Maseches Tainus, one of the big discussions is when it doesn't rain in Israel, that is a big deal. And there's all these sets of fast days. And the fast days are very, very stringent. There's a lot of stringencies about those fast days. You can't do this, you can't do that. What the Gemara is saying is that outside of Israel, those fast days do not exist with all those stringencies. The only fast day that has significant stringencies is Tisha B'Av. Okay, meaning whatever stringencies we have in the Tainus Tibor, the public fast days that exist because of a lack of rain, the only fast day that has similar characteristics are Tisha B'Av. Is Tisha B'Av. Lememra. Does this say, Shmuel Tisha B'Av bein hashmashos lo aser? One of the implications would be that at twilight, bein hashmashos, between sunset and nightfall, it would be forbidden to work on Tisha B'Av. Meaning, if you're telling me that Tisha B'Av has the same characteristics as those other fast days, then what comes out is that it would be forbidden to eat, be forbidden to work, bein hashmashos. V'amar Shmuel Tisha B'Av bein hashmashos lo mutter. However, Shmuel says, not like that. Shmuel says that bein hashmashos, you are allowed to work. You're allowed to eat. Okay, we'll come back to how we practice practically.
Why would we think that you can't do it?
Because he just said that Tisha B'Av is like the Tainus Tibor, and we know from Masechus Tainus that those Tainus Tibor, the halacha is that you cannot eat or drink, that from sunset to nightfall we act with all the stringencies during that time, meaning you don't eat, you don't work, and yet if you're saying that it's the same thing as the Tainus Tibor, that would mean on Tisha B'Av you also would not be allowed to work. And the problem is Shmuel tells us that no, after bein hashmashos you are allowed to eat. Okay, so answers the Gemara. Shmuel kol Tainus Tibor bein hashmashos lo mutter. Okay, so maybe we misunderstood things. Maybe Shmuel actually holds that other Tainus Tibor you would be allowed to eat and you would be allowed to work during those times, and then there's no problem because then there is consistency. Vanantnan, we learn in the Mishnah that's not true. The Mishnah says regarding a Tainus Tibor, they are allowed to eat and drink while it is still day. What does it come to exclude? Lav lemiyute bein hashmashos. Does that not come to exclude bein hashmashos? Saying that bein hashmashos, again after twilight, after sunset, it would be forbidden to eat, and all the other stringencies would kick in. So the Gemara says, Lav lemiyute. It doesn't say so explicitly. Maybe the Mishnah only comes to say that you're not allowed to eat after dark, but there is no explicit proof that you would not be allowed to eat or drink bein hashmashos, and therefore, again, we're saying there's no question on Shmuel, because maybe by other Tainus Tibors also you would be allowed to eat and drink bein hashmashos. Right? Again, our question arose because we said, Shmuel said, we're saying they're the same, and yet Shmuel says you're allowed to eat and drink during bein hashmashos. How could that be if they're really the same? So maybe we're saying, no, maybe by the other fast days you are allowed to eat and drink bein hashmashos. And now we're going to try to bring a proof to this. Ein bein Tisha B'Av Yom Kippurim. We have a brisa which says that there is no difference between Tisha B'Av and Yom Kippur. Okay, it says this cryptic statement that the only difference is that in Yom Kippur the doubts are forbidden, and on Tisha B'Av the doubts are permitted. My sveiko mutter, la ben hashmashos. When you say that the sveiko, what does it mean the doubt is permitted? Presumably, what doubt do we have on every day? We have a doubt. Between sunset and nightfall, there is a doubt. Is it day or is it night? And so the implication sounds like it's saying that on Yom Kippur, from sunset to nightfall, we have to be stringent. And that's what we do, right? When sunset kicks in on Yom Kippur, we stop eating. We stop working because maybe it's Yom Kippur. And on the end, we do the same. And that's what the Bryce seems to be saying, that Shezez Feiko Aser, that Yom Kippur, the doubt, meaning the doubtful time of the day, is going to be, we're going to be act stringently. Whereas on Tisha B'Av, the doubtful time of the day, we're going to act leniently. This would seem to be a support for Shmuel. The Gemara says, no, that's not what it means. Rather, what it means like this, the Kviya Diyarcha, regarding the establishment of the new month. In other words, if there is some doubt around the calendar, Hachinam the Kviya Diyarcha, here too, if there's some doubt about the calendar. What this brisa actually means, we're suggesting, is that if there is a doubt as to which day is actually Tisha B'Av, or if there's a doubt as to which day is Yom Kippur. So when it comes to Yom Kippur, Sveiko Aser, what that means is that, and think about this, you and I, we all have a calendar. Back in the day, they didn't have calendars, and they would be strict, okay, and so what happens when you don't know what day is Yom Kippur, when you don't know what day is the day of the month, so that's where the 2-day Yom Tov comes in. But guess what? You could also have a 2-day Yom Kippur. They would have a 2-day Yom Kippur, which is hard for us to wrap our head around, but they would have a 2-day Yom Kippur. When it comes to Tisha B'Av, no, they were not so strict. You just have a 1-day misafek, and that would be sufficient, right? That's what this brisa is coming to teach us, but nothing about bein hashmashos. Darash Rava.
Part of the whole reason why everyone does 2 days Rosh Hashanah is because
yes,
you want to make sure that you don't have it until Yom Kippur. You want to make sure you get Rosh Hashanah on the right day, but then you know which day is going to be Yom Kippur.
Okay, I'm not sure if I follow that logic. Meaning, by doing a double, how does that show? How does that?
You know which day is going to be the first.
Not if you're doing 2 days misafek. Right. If I do 2 days because I don't know which day it is, then I have to that pattern follows. And I do day 10, 9, and 10.
Sure that you don't miss Rosh Hashanah, but you're still gonna.
Okay, so let's go for a little further. Josh Rava, Ubaros, Menikos, Besanos, Mashlimas Bo. Pregnant and nursing women are obligated to fast and complete their fast on Tisha B'Av. Kederach Besanos, Mashlimas Yom Kippurim. Just like on Yom Kippur, Tisha B'Av, Yom Kippur, women who are pregnant, women who are nursing, they have to fast. Uvein Hashmashos Shalo Aser, and during the twilight of Tisha B'Av, one is prohibited from eating. V'chein Amru Mishmei to Rav Yochanan, and this is what they said in the name of Rav Yochanan. So, as opposed to what we just saw from Shmuel, who said that bein Hashmashos of Tisha B'Av, you are allowed to eat. We do not pass like this. We pass like this last statement, which is all those things. That a woman who's pregnant or nursing, Tisha B'Av, Yom Kippur, she should fast. Absent some exceptions, scenarios where a woman is not well, whatever it is, there are certain exceptions, but generally speaking, a woman should fast during those times. And we paskin like the statement of Rav Yochanan that it's prohibited from eating already from bein hashmashos, from sunset, and not from nightfall. And the first thing Mara is going to first have to substantiate this. So, Rabbi Yochanan really say this. From Rabbi Yochanan, Tisha B'Av Eino Ketanis Tibor. Rabbi Yochanan says that Tisha B'Av is not like a public fast day. Again, by public fast day, he means those fast days that were done for rain, which were very stringent. My lav the bein hashmashos. When he says it's not like public fast day, is he not referring to the bein hashmashos idea, which would seem to say that in this second statement of Rabbi Yochanan, he's saying that you are allowed to eat bein hashmashos after sunset. Lo lemalacha. No, what Rabbi Yochanan came to say is Tisha B'Av is not like a public fast day. That a public fast day you didn't do work. When they were fasting for a lack of rain, there was no malacha. You would stop from work on that day, and it was a day of davening. When it comes to Tisha B'Av, you are allowed to work. Ask the Gemara, malacha tanina. You wouldn't need Rabbi Yochanan to tell us that because we already have a Mishnah. Our Mishnah says, Makam shenagu lasas malacha b'Tisha B'Av osin. In a place where the custom was to work, you do work. Makam shenagu shelo says ein osin. And a place where the custom is not to do work, we do not do work. Even Rav Gamliel, lo amar, he didn't say el dechi yasiv lo avi lo machse kiyura. All Rav Gamliel was saying when he said that you should not work was saying that you do not appear haughty by not working. Aval meister lo asar. But even Rav Gamliel was not saying it's forbidden to work. He was just saying that you and I, who are not the great scholars, we should also not work. We should act like we are a scholar, right? But he wasn't saying it's forbidden to work. He's saying we should step it up. The bottom line is, the Gemara is asking, if Rav Yochanan's point was to say that Tisha B'Av is not like a Tanis Tibor in regards to work, we have our Mishnah that talks about that. You don't need Rav Yochanan and Amora to come along and elaborate and tell us anything about that. Elamai ena ketanis Tibor. What does he mean? Let's feel ne'ilah. Rather, when Rav Yochanan said that Tisha B'Av is not like a Tanis Tibor, is that when they had a Tanis Tibor, they would actually say ne'ilah, just like on Yom Kippur. But when there was a lack of rain, that was a really, really big deal. That put the entire country in existential crisis, right? And therefore, when they would daven, they would add ne'ilah. And Rav Yochanan was coming to say that on Tisha B'Av we do not say ne'ilah. On those other Tainises, we do say ne'ilah. We have a statement in Maseches Brachos. Rav Yochanan says a person should daven all day long. He says it would be so nice if we could daven all day long, right? So why can't you say ne'ilah? So the Gemara says no. Hasam chova hacharashus. By a public fast, very easy, obvious answer. By a public fast day, there's an obligation to say ne'ilah. Rav Yochanan did say, yeah, you should daven all day. He was saying it'd be nice if you can daven all day, but he wasn't saying an obligation to daven all day. Be by saying alternatively, my ena katanis tibor. What does it mean when Rav Yochanan said that Tisha B'Av is not like a public fast day? Le'esrim v'arba, referring to the 24 blessings of the Shemona Esrei, that there's extra brachos that are added to Shemona Esrei on a tanis tibor for the rain, but when it comes to Tisha B'Av, we just have a regular Shemona Esrei. Okay, Rav Papa Amar, my ena katanis tibor. What does he mean? It's not like a tanis tibor. Eno karishonos ela kachronos vasura. It means Tisha B'Av is not like the first series of fast days when you're meaning when there was not rain, there was like a whole series of fast days. The first series of fast days were like a minor fast in the sense that they would start the fast in the morning. The second set of fasts, they start, if it still didn't rain after a while, they would continue fasting and they would start the fast and the night before. So when he says it's not like the fast of the fast of rain, what he was saying is not like the earlier fast where those fasts they start in the morning. Tisha B'Av is different. We start the night before. Okay, bottom line is all these halachos that are emerging are true. That those fast days for rain were very stringent. They didn't work. Tisha B'Av you work. On those other fast days you send Elah. On Tisha B'Av you don't send Elah. On those fast days you said 24 brachos and Shemona Esrei. Here you don't. On those other fast days, the one leniency is that on those other fast days, on the earlier ones you would start fasting in the morning. With Tisha B'Av you start at night. Okay, says the Gemara further. Meisvei, we have a question on this. Ein bein Tisha B'Av Yom Kippurim el shezes feiko aser v'zes feiko motzur. Same question we had before. The Gemara says, hey, you're telling me that bein hashmashos, that between sunset and nightfall you actually go ahead and fast. However, we have this brisa which says that when it comes to the difference between Tisha B'Av and Yom Kippur, when it comes to Yom Kippur, the suffix time, the suffix is forbidden, and by Tisha B'Av the suffix is permitted. So the Gemara again has the same shakav, the same back and forth. My speak on mutter. What does it mean that the doubt is permitted? Turn the page. We are on 54b4. La ben hashmasha shalom. Are we not referring to the twilight of Tisha B'Av? And the implication is that whereas on Yom Kippur it's forbidden to work, on Tisha on Yom Kippur would be forbidden to eat. On Tisha B'av would be permitted to eat. The Gemara says no. Amar Rav Shisha Bar Rav Idi lo l'kviyah diarcha. Again, like we answered before, the suffix we're referring to is not the daily suffix of every day, rather referring to a more global suffix that we're not sure about what the day is. Okay, halachol dvarim zev shavin. Okay, the Gemara goes back to that Brisa. The Brisa said that the only stringency that Yom Kippur has, that the only difference between Yom Kippur and Tisha B'av is that the suffix. So now which we established, that means that if we don't know what day Yom Kippur or Tisha B'av is, so Tisha B'av we do a double fast, Yom Kippur we do a double fast, and Tisha B'av we do a single fast. But the implication of the Brisa is regarding everything else, Zev is Shavin. Again, what are the terminology the Brisa said? The Brisa said that there is no difference. There's no difference except for the suffix. Okay, so 2 days Yom Kippur, 1 day Tisha B'av. Everything else should be the same. Ask the Gemara. Says the Gemara, Halachal Dvarim Zev is Shavin. Regarding everything else, it's the same. So first of all, Mr. Yela Rebbe Lazar. This supports Rebbe Lazar. Rebbe Lazar. Asr lo Adam Shioshid Etzbav Ma'im B'Tisha B'av K'derech She'asr lo Shid Etzbav B'Yom Kippurim. This supports Rebbe Lazar, who said that on Yom Kippur, that Tisha B'av is the same as Yom Kippur. That in as much as on Yom Kippur you are not allowed to go ahead and get even your finger wet on Yom Kippur. Now, you can wash your hands, but to just put your hand under water for no reason, it's usher. So too on Tisha B'av, and this Brisa seems to support that, this statement seems to support that, because he said there's no difference between Yom Kippur and Tisha B'av. Implication for all halachos. However, there is a question. Meisvei, Amen Tisha B'av l'tanis tzibor, el shezeh asr basiyas malacha, v'zeh mutter basiyas malacha, b'makam shnagu, halachol devreim zev shavin. Okay, so the Brisa, we ask from the Brisa, which says that Tisha B'av and Tanis Tzibor are the same, with the exception of work. Then on the public fast you can't do work. On Tanis Tzibor you could do work. But when it comes to public fast day, the only thing that was usher was actually washing one's face, hands, and feet. And the implication of this last brisa we just quoted is saying that Tisha B'av is the same as those other fast days, and those other fast days you are allowed to wash your hands and feet. And yet you're telling me from Rebbe Lazar that you're not allowed to wash your hands and feet. So again, let's just pause for a second, just to review. And we're going a little fast. Rebbe Lazar is telling us you are not allowed to wash your hands and feet. You're not allowed to do any washing on Yom Kippur. This Brisa is telling us that Tanis Tzibor and Tisha B'av are the same. And we know for the Tanis Tzibor, you are allowed to wash your hands and feet, right? And that would mean that Tisha B'av you should be able to do so as well. So Rav Papa says, no question, Tana kule katani. The Tana who made that statement, who said there is no difference, he didn't actually mean that exhaustively. He was just trying to highlight the ways that Tisha B'av is more lenient than the other days. In other words, when he said there's no difference between Tisha B'av and those other fast days, he was highlighting that those other fast days are more strict than Tisha B'av in the following fashion, that on the other fast days you are not allowed to work, whereas on Tisha B'av you are technically allowed to work. But he wasn't highlighting all the stringencies, and when it comes to stringencies, there are indeed other stringencies that Tisha B'av you are not allowed to wash your hands, whereas on the other fast days, on the public fast day, you are allowed to wash your hands and feet. So let's just halacha l'maisa. Technically, after chatzos, a person is allowed to work on Tisha B'av. The Gemara writes elsewhere, not the time and place, not the place, but the Gemara writes elsewhere that a person does any personal work on Tisha B'av, even after chatzos, ein arosim bracha, you see no success coming out of your work. So it's strongly encouraged that, again, we act like a Talmid Chacham, that we do not work. There are scenarios where it's impossible to avoid, but it should really be avoided as best as possible on Tisha B'av. Have a great day.